So I think that if you would just allow for pain to take over your life, you would feel a lot better about your life.
I might. And if we're talking about pain, we should talk about the book of Esther.
Why?
Because there's a lot of people that get pained in that story.
What way do they get pained? Who gets pained and how?
Well, Queen Vashti got pained. She's standing up for something she thinks is right, and she gets canned as queen.
What do you mean that she gets pained? The poor guy, the king, he gets pained. She stood him up.
In what way is the king ever pained in that story? He's got everything going for him.
He had the whole hall full of guests watch him being stood up by his wife.
A man who's secure in himself can never get put down by a wife.
Wow! But was he really confident in himself? He had to serve all of his guests wine in golden goblets, each one different from the other. I mean, what kind of show is he making?
That wasn't even a show. The Persians were well known for their drinking habits.
Ooh, were they good drinking habits?
They were abundant drinking habits. They loved to drink.
Yeah, what did they like to drink?
Everything.
Yeah?
Especially wine.
Why are they so well known for it?
I don't know. That's just what history tells us. They were just known for their drinking.
Oh, they must have had a lot of good fun then.
They were quite moral, actually.
Really?
Yeah, but their big vice was they loved to drink.
Why is that such a big vice?
Well, so for some people, apparently it's not.
Okay. Well, maybe it was for Hashvarosh because he lost his wife in such a drinking party. How long did this drinking party last? What was it? It was like 180 days or something?
Yeah.
It's a good long party.
And we have some, archaeology has actually found some drinking mugs.
Yeah, really?
Some for beer, some for wine.
Wow, okay.
And they're incredibly beautiful, gold and silver,
Wow.
just like the book of Esther says.
Wow, nice. Well, talking about the book of Esther, happy Purim.
Chag Purim Sameach.
Chag Sameach. Well, indeed, it was a lot of fun yesterday, getting all dressed up and getting together with our little kiddos and reading the book of Esther together, Megillat Esther.
That's the first time we did it only as a family. That was awesome.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I mean, it's sad to miss our friends, but it's a lot of fun to just be us with the kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, they seem to have a lot of good fun.
Mm-hmm.
And well, I indeed myself enjoyed getting all handsome and royal, emulating Mordechai on the great royal steed.
That's what you were doing?
Yes, that's what I was doing. I was Mordechai. Okay, my hair is a little purple.
The purple hair hanging down over everything?
How you know he wasn't purple-headed either? I mean, also.
They put a purple robe on him, did they?
Well, yeah, that's probably what I was going for.
Yeah.
The long hair, the robing down, cascading down. Yeah. In fact, that is one of the reasons why perhaps we have this whole idea of getting dressed up for Purim to begin with.
That plus the idea at the end of the book, I think it says to everybody is having fun, making joy.
Having fun, making joy. It's quite burdensome being Jews, The story tells the whole story as to why it's so burdensome to be Jewish. On one hand, people want to kill you. On the other hand, you just want to have fun.
We commemorate every occasion, good or bad, by drinking and eating.
Drinking and eating, and in this case, putting purple hair on.
Yeah.
Another reason why you might find people doing it is the idea. Tell me what you think about this. I thought it was kind of interesting that it looked like that God is going to let the Jewish people get annihilated. And then halfway through, the story turns around and he saves them. And more than this, it seems as though Jews are also worshiping idols. But this is not the case. They are worshiping the God of Israel. And so Therefore, somehow that translates into that today, when we're having fun, why do we get dressed up? Is to behave the opposite manner. And so if you're sober, it's time to drink a little bit more. If you are somebody who is well put together, it's now time to dress up as the opposite of what you normally usually are.
That's true.
What do you think?
Well, there's a lot to unpack in that statement.
Okay.
In all fairness, it's just some religious people that feel they have to get drunk at Purim.
Hey, I would not limit it only to those religious folk. But yes, I have seen a little bit more than I'd like to see from time to time.
Go to a kids' party at Purim. I remember sitting outside yesterday waiting for Aiden to come home out of school.
Yeah.
They were having a big Purim party at school, and all the kids were wearing their costumes, and the music was fun and happy, and they had food and candy and all kinds of stuff. They know how to have fun. They weren't drunk.
No, they weren't. They were drunk with candy and happiness.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a lot of fun. In fact, it is really one of the nice things, unexpected joys. Being young parents was going to kindergarten with Revaya and her costume, whether it's Purim or the festive lights of Hanukkah. Those fun times are really lots of fun. And now also in elementary school, all the kids and all the teachers getting all dressed up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Except for how it's starting to be really more like the Israeli Halloween.
Yeah, that's the down part.
Yeah. Why is it that people like to dress up as death?
That's another discussion. That's a good question, though.
I don't know. People have a great fascination with death. It's so popular, whether it is here or America. Why is death as a costume celebration so captivating?
Maybe because everybody has to face it, and if we feel that if we talk about it early, it'll ease the pain when it happens.
I like that. That makes good sense. Instead of just condemning people as, death-like, demonic, I don't know what. Well, it's not something that we talk about enough, perhaps, in our modern Western society. Death is really quite a clean and out of the way, not so much in part of a child's upbringing.
Did you see the Stupid Deaths segment on Horrible Histories?
Stupid deaths, it's funny because it's true. Hope next time it's not you.
Talk about a stupid death. There's Haman.
Uh-huh.
He had quite a stupid death. He builds a gallows 50 feet tall, or 50 cubits tall.
What's a cubit?
It's like from your elbow to the top of your biggest, longest finger.
So 50 of those going quite high in the sky for all to see.
And he gets hung on it.
Wait a minute. And what way does he get hung on it? Are we talking about a noose around the neck?
Well, that's a possibility.
Yeah.
I mean, they did do that, but it's more likely, if archaeology helps with anything, that they weren't hung by a noose. Mm-hmm. They were impaled on a stake.
Spiked.
Yeah.
Not really stupid deaths. Well, in his case, unfortunately, yeah, I guess so. We have those, maybe it is relevant, the tragic memory of the Assyrians here in Israel. They conquered Lachish.
Yeah.
We have those, what do you call them? The reliefs of the conquest of Lachish, and outside the city, maybe those who are fleeing and refugees, or those fleeing the city, impaled. Literally, it's going up into them, and they're just hanging on it.
They're just hanging.
And where were these reliefs? They're originally they're in Assyria, so we're not talking about Persia. We're talking about Assyria in this case.
That's true, but they lived close to each other.
Yeah, right. But that was a decoration of the palace, wasn't it?
Yeah. It was propaganda, Assyrian propaganda, showing how great and mighty they are. And here's what they do to their enemies.
Yeah, and this is what we have done. We impaled.
Yeah.
So that is the beginning point of Israel's exile into the east. And then it increases with the Babylonian conquest of Judah. And then the Persians take over the Babylonians, right?
Yeah.
So by this time, so where are we in history when we open up Megillat Esther, the scroll of Esther? Where are we?
We're sometime in the middle of the 5th century, I believe, I think.
Okay, so
Yeah.
500s and something. So
400 something.
thank you, 400 something.
It's all right.
So that means that Israel, why are they still in Persia,
That's a good question.
right?
Yeah.
So where in relation to the to Israel's history, where are we?
Well, we began with the Persians conquering Babylon in October of 536 before Yeshua. That set the captives free. And the prophets like Isaiah and others exhorted the people of Israel to come home. They were free. Come on home and build God's house again. And that was 536. Some did come home, and we read Ezra and Nehemiah, and they led some groups of captives home. But for all intents and purposes, according to most scholars, most Jewish people still stayed in Mesopotamia.
Okay.
It wasn't, when we were captive there, it wasn't like we were all thrown in dungeons. Maybe our leadership might have been. But the common people were not thrown in dungeons. And in fact, less than a century after that, we have records of Jewish merchants making it big in Babylon.
Wow. Okay.
And so they remained in diaspora
So
all
there's
throughout
a
Mesopotamia.
certain degree of, well, economic freedom in that regard.
Yeah.
Right? They're as an exiled people, they're free to prosper themselves in whatever way they're able or allowed.
Especially after the Persians came and conquered Babylon. Then they were really, really free.
Okay. So the
Yeah.
Persians really made things more open and prosperous.
Yeah.
Opportunity for prosperity.
Absolutely.
Okay. So in this story also might indicate how there's a degree of political freedom in regard, not in like we think of today, but we have the rise of Mordechai in this story in quite a significant way.
Yeah, he's not a servant. He's not a slave. I don't know what he did for a living, but we find him frequently in the book of Esther hanging out at the gate of the king's palace. And he's free to move as he wishes. And then eventually, because of something that he did to favor the king, he gets honored.
Okay. So maybe it's just a sense of, well, the king will honor whom he wants to honor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So Israel has been called back to their homeland by God, sent back by the Persian Cyrus, and some return. They rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, rebuild the temple, and however, the majority of the people of Israel stay in exile.
Yeah.
They've got comfortable. They've decided that this is where their home is now. The next generation has been born in exile. This is where they want to stay.
And they're speaking the language of the exile. They're speaking Aramaic.
Okay.
They're speaking Persian. They're taking on Babylonian and Persian names.
Oh, yeah, right. So that's what we find with the heroes of Esther
Yeah.
and Mordechai.
Yeah.
What do these names indicate to us? What are the meanings of Esther and Mordechai?
Well, Esther, it was a common Jewish name now, but originally it was Babylonian.
Okay.
And many scholars suggest that it was related to Ishtar.
Ishtar, this Mesopotamian goddess, right? It's a goddess of love, beauty, kind of appropriate for a woman who's going to become queen because of her great beauty. But also maybe there's some association with war, perhaps. But I was just looking it up recently because of this occasion, and it seems that her representation of it, there is some representation of Ishtar with a lion, and lion has also relevance to the tribe of Judah as well. So there's different. The issue is really quite significant.
Wasn't there an 8-pointed star related to her?
Yeah,
too?
8-pointed star, and I think there's the consort of the god Tammuz.
Tammuz.
Yeah, familiar to us in our calendar, right?
Yeah.
So we have some pagan gods in our post-exile calendar. Yeah.
Yeah.
So she's quite important, right? And so for this Israelite young girl or young woman to be renamed, taking on this name of exile, that seems to be really, it indicates something to us. And then also her cousin Mordechai, also the same. Mordechai probably coming from Marduk, yeah, Mordechai. It's kind of be surprising if that's not the case.
Who was Marduk?
So Marduk, he will become the patron deity of Babylon, famed for saving his fellow pantheon of gods from the wrath of the dragon Tiamat, the saltwater marine goddess, who was not so much in the shape of a woman as much as she was more of a dragon-like beast. But her children, the gods, they angered her by being really, naughty kids, basically, rebelling against their parents, and they kill her husband, the freshwater god. And so she is enraged and is going to take her wrath out on the kids. And Marduk rises up and saves them by engaging her in combat and, kills her. Wow. Tears her in two. Ooh. And out of her body creates the universe. Ooh. So yeah, he's really quite important as a god, I think, of wisdom and such. And at the end of the Babylonian creation story, basically the purpose of the story is essentially not just making known Marduk, but also in the telling of the story, he's supposed to convey the wisdom in his many names as to living in a good way. And fathers are to teach their children, and the society is to learn what it is to live well in the repetition of the story. And so he's chief deity. He's a big deal.
It's funny how things go. There we have Mordecai and Esther, and they're so common in the world today. And they have good connotations to them, but those names both had pagan beginnings.
Right.
And so there's a lot of people today that say, well, this has a pagan beginning. Let's not do this.
Yeah.
Well, how many people know the origin of Mordecai and Esther?
Right. It's not so obvious to so many people today.
Exactly.
Whereas back then, that would be super obvious. You hear, even though we're not in Babylon anymore, we're in Persia, but much greater than Babylon. But still, people hear the name, they know where it's coming from.
And there's no effort to mask over it either.
No.
This is a pagan beginning. We have to wipe this out or not use it or whatever. No, Mordecai is probably writing the book of Esther.
Okay.
And all the copies that have come down to us, nobody has ever made any attempt to mask it over.
Yeah, right.
It didn't bother them.
Right. It's no big deal.
Yeah.
Because the part of the theme of the story is exemplifying his devotion, his faith to God, to the God of Israel, not to Marduk, not to Persian deities, but rather he's loyal to the king of Persia, but he even more so is loyal to the King of Kings, to the God of Israel. So there's nothing wrong with having a name that is harking the memory of the chief god of Babylon, who brought you into exile, destroying the house of your God, destroying Jerusalem, and yet being loyal to the very God of your people.
Yeah.
So that I think is really something remarkable and important to remember, because, like you said, a lot of people have a problem with anything with any pagan origins or beginnings.
Yeah. There's Book of Esther tells us what Esther's Hebrew name was, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so Hadassah. Right? So I like that.
It's a beautiful name.
Yeah, what is Hadassah? Probably it's coming from Hadass.
Yeah.
So in English, that would be a
Myrtle.
myrtle.
Yeah.
So,
So we have many English women in the previous generation named Myrtle.
okay, but indeed, maybe previous generation. I don't know many today called myrtle, but
No, it's an old name.
but I mean, but in Hebrew, not the case. I remember in school, I had friends who, one of them, her name was Hadass.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was quite a few Hadass in school, I remember.
And not just in school, we have a good friend named Hadass.
Yeah, even
Hadassah.
Hadassi.
Yeah.
Our friends. Call out to our friends, the Hadassis.
Yeah.
Right? So,
And our friend Hadassah in Kibbutz Ze'ev.
yeah, that's right. So but I think this is also special for our story because on one hand, okay, her common name is Esther, but there's a point to tell us that her name actually is Hadassah.
Yeah.
So there is perhaps reflected in this a memory, a call back to where have we come from, and it being a plant of the land of Israel. Okay, I'm sure there's also, that plant is probably over there too, but it's a plant that is common here.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's a memory of love of the land, a memory of the land, similar to how modern Israeli names for a long time were calling children after different elements of the land, whether it's a majestic tree or a beautiful flower or a beautiful doe, all sorts of different nature-like names of the land because they're celebrating the land. Maybe there's similarly, that was a generation of return from exile.
That's true.
Maybe there's a parallel to the first exile. Maybe there's a name, because I don't remember noticing a name like Hadassah beforehand. Maybe there was. I just don't remember one.
Before the exile return?
Yeah. Is she perhaps the first Hadassah? Or the only Hadassah in the Bible? I don't know.
It'll be on the Bible. No, I don't remember.
Yeah.
But the word Hadass appears in the Bible before that.
We are familiar with it for our celebration of Sukkot.
Sukkot, and also Zechariah in one of his night visions.
Oh, really?
Sees Hadassah trees.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah.
Okay.
One of the characteristics of a Hadass tree is that it's an evergreen. And sometimes people designate it as a symbol for Israel. Being evergreen means it never dies. Nice. No matter what you do to it, you can't kill it unless you pull it up by its roots and burn it or something.
Right.
But for all intents and purposes, it's a good picture of Israel, and especially appropriate for the book of Esther. They try to kill us, but you can't.
Right. Why not?
Because the God of Israel is our protector.
Right. Because of his chesed, his not just loving kindness, but his covenant loyalty. That no matter the loyalty or lack thereof of Israel to the covenant of the Torah, the covenants of the Torah, God remains loyal to his people. And therefore, the eternal nature of the miracle of Israel.
That's true.
And that is all for the credit of God and to the glorification of God. So yeah, that's lovely, and it's particularly appropriate from Zechariah, because I remember you teaching me how he's a prophet of exile.
Yeah.
Calling them home.
One of the voices.
Return back to Judah and rebuild the house of God.
And those night visions that I alluded to, I think there's 7 or 8 of them, they all have something to do with the call of Israel coming back. Each of the visions has something to do with meeting an apparent need or a hindrance that they thought that they had from coming back. And the night visions address those hindrances.
Okay.
And it's beautiful to see it in that light. And that's a good example of one of the many prophetic voices telling Israel, go home.
Okay. So telling Israel, go home, God is calling you home. Yet, like we said, most are remaining outside. And soon enough, we have this scroll of the story of Esther.
Yeah.
And I think that's really quite profound and really challenging, because, well, we're being called by God to return back to the land of our forefathers. And is it perhaps as a result of not returning that the danger that Israel will face here in exile is going to happen?
That's a good question to ask. I mean, for the past X hundreds of years, we have faced danger continuously. Yet God always somehow intervenes and protects us and keeps us alive. But sometimes it sure didn't seem like it.
Yeah, right. I mean, it looked pretty stark.
Yeah.
What comes to mind is Deuteronomy. Another famous passage of yours that I'm grateful to have grown up listening to your teaching from Deuteronomy 30, is it, right? Where God says to the people on the far side, east bank of the Jordan River, as Israel's about to cross over and enter into the land of their inheritance, that already God is telling them that you're not going to be loyal, you're not going to be faithful,
Yeah.
and you're not going to respond to the call of repentance, and therefore you're going to be exiled. And now in exile, when all of the covenant consequences come upon you, the curses and the blessings, while you're in exile, you will return as a result of the hardships of what it is to be exiled. But not just curses, but also blessings. So that there's both there. And that seems to be really quite relevant, because it seems that Deuteronomy, that God through Moses is speaking directly about this time, because this is the next time. This is the exile, right? And they are staying in exile, even though the call to return home has been extended. But why are they staying? Probably because of their prosperity. They've been born to associate with exile as their home. Right? So this is part of their identity, to the point that this is where they want to live. And as a result, there's going to be some real hardships, some real difficulties that this story is detailing.
And certainly the danger, having one's life continually in danger, is one of the problems.
Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit more about what is meant by curses?
Well, there's two different Hebrew words for curse, and one of them seems to highlight an unproductive land, a land that's not going to be fruitful. You're going to work hard with very little result, and your agricultural productivity is going to not be worthwhile. It's going to fail you. And the other one seems to be more than that. It can include that, but the klala might come from the word of kal, which could mean lightweightedness. And if that's the case, then there's more to it than just unproductive. There's something about your name, something about the quality of your life that is lightweighted, that is, you might say, void of substance.
Can we say that it might also reflect how the nations around us will treat us? They'll treat us as if we are nothing?
Yeah, so I think that seems to be indicated by the covenant that God made with Abraham. But for the opposite, those who curse you will be cursed. And well, so that is emphasizing God's devotion to Israel, that even though that's going to be the case, that there will be those who will curse you, who will make light of you, who will use your name against you as a curse instead of a blessing. Well, they will have consequences for that attitude, and that's what we see also in the book of Esther. So both of them are directly related to the covenant. That if you live by the covenant words, the commandments, the standard of what is righteous, what's just, what's upright, expressed as love, then it will go well for you, right? Because you're going to be treating other people in a respectful manner. And in this way, you're going to bring respect or honor, kavod, making the name of God weighty with value in the way in which you live. And in return, that is going to create for you also a reputation of honor in your own name.
So like with Mordechai, I don't know. I can't remember if the word Torah appears in the book of Esther.
Well, we read it yesterday, and I don't think it really does. I wasn't thinking about that, but now that it was fresh from last night, I don't think it does.
But from the book's description of Mordechai, we see a man certainly living Torah.
Right.
And in the end of the story, he turns out a well-respected and powerful person.
Right. He refuses to bend the knee to honor any other than God Himself.
Yeah.
While at the same time, this might also be this is something that came up in my ponderings of the story from last night. At the same time, he is honoring the king of Persia. He, not more than that, he's loyal to him. He seeks to save. He is responsible for saving the king's life. So he's more loyal than the king's men, as an exiled minority in the land. So on one hand, this is exploring perhaps also what it is to live in the right way in a foreign land that's not supposed to be your home, because it's not the land of Israel. How to live in the proper way where you're loyal to foreign powers as an expression of your loyalty to your God, to the God of Israel.
Without compromising any of your values.
Without compromising. He's not worshiping Marduk. And this is is irony the right word? He's not worshiping Marduk, right? He's worshiping the God of his fathers. Yet that's his name. Yet he's loyal to the commandments. He's not bending the knee in honoring Haman or the gods of Persia. So this is maintaining a difficult tension of the difficulty of life in exile when you choose to remain in exile, but loyal to who you are. That to me is a real challenge, because our last great festival was Hanukkah, where we focus on what it is to rededicate our lives, our hearts, and the memory of the rededication of the house of God as a house of prayer and worship. Yet, the context of the whole story was the challenge of assimilation into the Greek world that had conquered the Persians and us as well. So, what's the difference here? For the Hasmoneans fighting against those Jews who had assimilated, and themselves will also assimilate by taking on Greek names. Whereas in contrast here in Esther, we have Jews taking on pagan names, but but have they assimilated?
Not really. They haven't compromised their essential Torah values.
And that's what we see in Mordechai. While at the same time, nobody seems to know that Esther is amongst this people. So this is a bit of there's a tension here. Esther is not parading her Jewish identity, while Mordechai doesn't seem to be hiding it.
Right.
So yet he is raising her. So I think this is an interesting tension, and the book is not presenting this to really be the problem so much.
Yeah.
Is it?
No, not really. I think I see in Esther a Jewish woman who probably does have a real love for her God, yet is quite wise in how she's in a very precarious position.
Yeah, sure. She didn't have a choice in being taken to the palace.
Right. And it was God that gave her the beauty that caused her to be put in that position. So I think she's demonstrating wisdom and tactfulness in her witness for God.
Nice. Yeah.
So choosing her moments.
Right. You don't have to, you should not be unwise with how you are propagating all elements of your identity.
Yeah.
Right. In some situations, a certain insight is called for, and for Esther, it's different than what it is for Mordechai.
Yeah.
Even though they're from the same family. So I think that I like that. That makes good sense, because she has no say in the matter, and yet, if she and because of where she is, she must follow a certain protocol, as she explains that if she goes before the king without being summoned by the king, it's death for me.
Yeah.
So go pray, fast for my sake.
Yeah.
Because she's choosing to act on behalf of her people, and I would say therefore her loyalty to God, her loyalty to her people, even at the potential cost of her own life.
Mm-hmm.
So that's to be celebrated.
Yeah. I have a question for you. You've been asking a lot of the questions here.
I thought you were asking the questions.
I have a question now.
Oh dear.
There are some people in the course of time, some scholars in the course of time, that say that the book of Esther should not be in the Word of God.
Mm.
And the reasons why they say that, one reason is because the word God is not mentioned in the book.
Mm. That's kind of strange. Yeah.
It is strange. It's not the only Bible book where that's the case, but it's strange.
Yeah.
What do you think? Do you think that it's clearly the Word of God or not?
I think that in a day in which those challenges that they faced have become, those challenges have become quite familiar to our people over the past thousands of years. And that to me is already enough for me to even if I did not believe in God, as so many Jews today are in such a situation of not believing in God, well, this book should offer us wisdom, guidance, warning, and I think it does. And the fact that it has proven the test of time, I think, speaks for itself. In that, like in those days, so also today, most Jewish people don't live in the land of Israel. We're scattered throughout the world.
Mm-hmm.
And how many times over the millennia have we faced genocide, or most recent in our memory in Nazi Germany, Nazi occupied Europe, and then not only the genocide or the goal of annihilating all of the Jews by the Nazis, but the genocide that then continued after the war, whether it's pogroms in Poland, unfortunately, which friends of ours are working very strongly to promote awareness amongst their own people, or whether it was the genocide that continued and by the Soviet Union, the communist Russia. This is a recent memory, and then for those of us living here in Israel, with the awareness of what it is to be in a neighborhood of nations that have such verbal hatred towards us. The expression of Iran's intent to develop nuclear capacity for the purpose of annihilating Israel, and arguably the only reason why they haven't used their missiles against us already. I mean, that they have enough missiles to obliterate the whole map, but it's only their fear of Israel's capacity to retaliate that has kept them at bay. And since before the establishment of the State of Israel, the repeated attempt to really kill all the Jews of the land.
Our enemies don't hide anything either. They expressly state they want to get rid of us. Hamas and Hezbollah and so forth.
Till now, right?
Yeah.
And so this story is so familiar to us. The fact that the book of Esther is written thousands of years ago, yet it is still relevant in terms of this hatred of the Jewish people, that is the kind of hatred that leads people to want to annihilate the Jewish people for different reasons at different times, whether we're talking about the Islamic Brotherhood or Nazi Germany, or communist Russia, whatever, the different reasons, but the same result. And therefore, the wisdom that this book offers, it's somewhat unique in the Bible in that regard. I mean, we have a lot of history of powers wanting to annihilate the Jews, but is there another biblical book where where a power wants to annihilate the Jews altogether?
We're going to talk about that in about a month from now.
Okay. So, but in terms of Egypt, they didn't want to annihilate all the Jews. They wanted to enslave the Jews. And even when Pharaoh pursues Israel after the Exodus in the desert, he wants to re-enslave Israel. And so, yes, he did carry out a genocide against the children of Israel, boys, but the purpose was to enslave, right? But the purpose of Haman was to annihilate. So this is really quite unique, and I think that is part of what's so important, is for people to understand that it's not accidental that God's name or his reference is not in the book. It seems to me that there is a certain call or warning of what is going to be our fate if we become godless. Now, Mordechai, as we said, we celebrate him as one who lives by, who makes decisions by his faith in God, to not bend the knee to any other God. But as a people, this is not where we belong. There's a certain element of God that is not in our people at this time. And I think that's why God's name is not in the book. There's something missing, and that's why we are in such danger of annihilation here. Yeah. And the people of Israel are in the book of Esther. We're innocent. We haven't done anything. There's nothing by which we should be held guilty in this book, except for the fact that perhaps we are everywhere.
We didn't go home.
We didn't go home. We chose to remain in exile.
And that's what happened with Pesach too. For whatever reason, between the years of Joseph and the years of Moses, we chose to stay in Egypt.
Right. And I think that is the challenge, and that indeed God sent our fathers to Egypt. He told them to go.
Yeah.
But he didn't tell our fathers to make Egypt their home. He had promised this land bridge by which he would entrust his revelation to the descendants of Israel, to live the Torah of righteousness and justice and peace in the sight of all the nations as a revelation and a proclamation of God's name to all the peoples. Yet, instead of living there, or here in this land bridge, we've chosen a land that is more prosperous, the land of Egypt, and a land that is more sophisticated, a land that is more advanced, and so forth. And now in Persia, and a land that is so sophisticated and prosperous and wonderful in so many ways. But that's not where we were called to live as the people of the name of God.
Yeah.
So I think that is you asked me, should Esther be in the Bible, as when our sages asked the question, should it really be in the Bible? And yeah, they explain why indeed it should be. And without going into the explanations, that's how I think about it, because I think we should ask. We should take by faith, first of all, that, well, the scriptures are the word of God, but to ask the reason why it prospers us, it benefits us to challenge ourselves as to, why do I choose to put my faith in this text, especially when the Bible is celebrated by so many people throughout the world who are not Jewish.
Yeah.
Why should they care about this story of the Jewish people in Persia? Who cares?
And what does Purim have to do with them?
Right. Yeah. What relevance is there?
Yeah.
And therein, for Christians who celebrate faith according to the scriptures, there is a lot of talk in the apostolic scriptures of Egypt being the example of what it means to be enslaved. People of God are enslaved in Egypt, so also you are enslaved to sin. Well, how does that connect one to the other? Indeed, this is what we talk about next month, but where is Israel sinning by being in Egypt, by being slaves in Egypt? How is Israel sinning by that? Well, my suggestion is simply by associating a land that is not where they belong to be their home, meaning this to put roots down, to put a foundation of your home down, to make this land your home when God has covenanted you another inheritance. This land is not my inheritance. That land is my inheritance. I'm to go there. I'm to live there for His purpose, for His glory.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we have done in Persia, right? Throughout the Persian Empire. We have made a land that is not ours. And so also, well, apply that to metaphorically then for today, for all peoples, not only the people of Israel, but all peoples who choose to take guidance from the scriptures of Israel as the revelation of God and His word and wisdom for them also. Ask the question, where do I belong? And ask the question, what lifestyle do I belong to? Well, Israel is covenanted. And that's why they have the curses and blessings of the covenant come upon them, as Deuteronomy says would be. But the purpose of those curses and blessings, or instead of curses, as you would put it, as you have put it so often, there's covenant problems, covenant difficulties.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to have difficulties, and sometimes it's not our fault, but I can look for what responsibility do I have to my own problems. Even if it's beyond me, out of my hands, we'll look for something that I can take responsibility for. Because it's much more useful to look for what could I change, what could I improve that will make my covenanted expression of life, my covenanted loyalty, more true, more effective. That to me is part of how we can apply the wisdom of Deuteronomy and the book of Esther to ourselves. Israel is innocent in this story. How can people then who are not Jewish apply this to themselves? That does offer a bit of a challenge, but I think that these are some of the questions that I've been pondering over since reading it last night, that I think is relevant for any circumstance. What is it to live under a power that you haven't elected? You have no choice in the matter. Not everybody lives in a politically free society.
Yeah.
And today, particularly, even those of us who do live in free societies, this is increasingly the question and challenge for us of how easy is it for us to lose our freedoms, all right? But for them, and therefore, what do we do to fight back to retain our freedoms in our free Western societies? But for them, that's not as relevant. Right? They don't have a choice to live under the king of Persia, even if they do return to Judah. But so what do you do? How do you live loyal to God and true to yourself when you live under a power that you haven't elected? How do you maintain your life in an upright manner?
Just live Torah. That's what Israel did.
Right.
Near the end of the book of Esther, there's quite an enigmatic statement. It's almost as if it's said in passing. When the Jews were granted permission to save themselves, defend themselves, they did, and they were victorious over their enemies. Then it says that many in the Persian Empire became Jews.
Right, that's amazing, huh? I forgot about that till we read that last night. That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's the first mass conversion, basically.
Well, I think that whenever the people of Israel have lived out Torah and listened to their God faithfully, it's always attracted others to them.
Right.
So we have believers in Yeshua I'm not advocating conversion to Judaism. I'm not at all whatsoever.
Right.
But according to places like Ephesians chapter 2, by virtue of their faith in Yeshua, they have been brought into Israel by God. So that Israel's Torah is their Torah, and Israel's history is their history, and Israel's celebrations like Purim are their celebrations too.
So as they enter into this people, they inherit a collective memory of the people of Israel.
Yeah.
Recorded in the scriptures, it becomes their memory. It becomes their celebrations.
Yep.
Israel's joys become your joys.
Exactly.
Israel's griefs become your griefs. I mean, to want to be associated with the people of God, you would say is a wonderful thing until people want to annihilate the people of God.
Yeah.
So your responsibilities, Israel's responsibilities become your responsibilities.
Yeah.
And the heaviness, the weightiness becomes your burden as well. And that is, it's sober, but it's wonderful. And I think that is such a wonderful reflection, what you've just said, that as a result of Israel's actions, so many throughout the empire will identify with the Jewish people as Jews, as themselves. This is remarkable, and it really, I think, speaks of not knowing the consequence of your actions in a positive sense. I mean, on one hand, Jews were being good citizens. They and to the point that Esther says to the king, if the decree was sent out that all of my people would be enslaved, I would not say a word. I wouldn't come to you, because that's not worthy to burden you. Just because we've been made slaves, it's not worthy. But to be annihilated,
that's another story.
I had to plea for life.
Yeah.
And so what do you choose to fight for when you are in such circumstances? Where this by itself is difficult, but they weren't fighting. When they're then given the freedom to fight, they were only defending themselves. They didn't go out looking to kill. It specifically says that they defended themselves. Mm-hmm. So they were still being attacked, but now they're allowed to defend themselves, and therefore they overcame their enemies who sought to kill them.
Yeah.
Very much like our modern history today. In every one of the wars of Israel today, from before the establishment of the State of Israel all the way through to the present, we have always fought defensively. Consistently, only defensively, even if it was at times proactively. Mm-hmm. So it's at that point that so many throughout Persia wanted to make peace with and then identify with. Mm-hmm. Well, so also today, Israel being strong has also contributed to the most recent peace and normalization here in the Middle East with the Abraham Accords.
Yeah,
I mean, it is argued that because of the great danger and hatred that Iran has now for other Arab states in the Middle East. The other kingdoms or the non-Shia states, but not only that. I mean, Bahrain, I think, is Shia, isn't it? I think.
I don't know.
I think so, but we could be corrected on that. But in any case, these countries fear Iran apparently more than we do, because there's a historical animosity, and there is a current expression there's a current real threat that Iran poses to all these countries. And making peace with Israel, well, it's because of Israel's strength, whether it's economic, whether it's technological or militarily. Israel being strong is what attracts peace. our Arab neighbors wanting to make peace with us. This is really important. This is amazing to me. But what makes us strong, I would hope, has a moral base. And this, I think, is being really challenging. It's really challenging right now of, are we maintaining a moral base? And you can argue about that, but to a certain degree, the fact that Israel wants to make peace with all of our neighbors, even Iran, suggests that there is a strong moral base in Israel. I mean, the moment that the borders were open for Israelis to visit the Arab Emirates,
they went.
Israelis flocked there. They so desire to know their neighbors, to
do business and do relationships. Yeah.
Right. There is a desire for peace. There's a desire for life and friendship and love. Unfortunately, maybe we have a lot of moral shortcomings. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But at the base, there is a lot of good, and I think that this is a modern example of this ancient story.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's exciting.
Yeah,
because it's not just ancient; it's going on today, also.
I think that's a good place to conclude our conversation, perhaps.
Right. So next time we sit together, let's talk about Pesach and the lovely little booklet you have. The booklet of a week in the life of the Lamb. Let's talk about that.
Next time.
All right, fine. Chag Sameach.
Yeah, you too.
Chag Sameach.
Bye, everybody.